You can't stress out about what you think your life is going to be 5 years from now. You have to look at what your life is today, and you have to make decisions that are right for you today.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a free resource for women who work in the sports and entertainment industry. Each week, we get real and talk about the things that hold us back and how we can overcome them and keep climbing to the top. And the top is however you define it. We talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Consider this podcast your secret weapon. You will learn from the best in the business and be able to take immediate action with all the advice that you hear. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake, a leadership development coach and consultant. I've worked in sports for 20 years. 15 of those years were spent working for the Red Sox, Dodgers, and the Cubs. After 15 years of working in the front office, I took a leap of faith and I started my own business. Friends, as a Black woman in sports, I know that the industry can take a toll on your confidence and sometimes leave you feeling defeated. Join me each week so I can support you on your journey. I promise you, each week you will feel stronger and more confident than the week before. So let's get started with this week's episode. I am so excited y'all are here for this conversation. I am chatting with Leah Linke, who is the Senior Vice President of Event Production and Operations for On Location. Y'all, she dropped some incredible knowledge. What I loved about our conversation is that Leah has always run her own playbook. For example, she left the sports and entertainment industry as a director, and when she chose, keyword there, chose, when she chose to come back 2 or 3 years later, she came back as an SVP. Listening to Leah's journey over the past 30 years in the industry is like getting your own private masterclass on running your own playbook and living in the present moment. Before we start, I feel like I need to give you the cliff notes on our background. Leah plays in the live event production space and has been a part of 15 Super Bowls. That's where I had the pleasure of meeting Leah. She has also had the opportunity to work with other global premier sports leagues, including FIFA, IOC, MLB, NHL, NASCAR, USTA, and USG. You know what? I'm going to stop talking. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, it is time. Let's jump into the good stuff. Leah, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Before we get started and we talk about your incredible career in sports, take us back in time and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
Well, it's so funny, Jahaan, because I know you have this question on your pre-interview screening. And the crazy thing about it is I hate sports.
Stop.
I do. I've never been a sports fan. The only sports that I ever enjoyed watching were watching my boys play sports, honestly. Yeah. And occasionally it kind of turned into a Father's Day thing where I would watch golf on Father's Day with my dad. But those are really the only sporting events that I truly enjoyed watching. However, I will say what I love about live sporting events is the spectacle around it and the experience around it. So that's what I fell in love with. And I fell in love with that back in 1994 when I started with the World Cup Organizing Committee.
Yes, that makes sense. Everyone, I know exactly what you mean. Like that, the energy that comes with sports and the fans and how passionate they are. And I remember someone asked me if I wanted to go work down at spring training for one of the teams I was working. And they're like, do you want to like go and you'd be there full time? And I was like, no, that's not the same energy. Like I don't put in all these hours just to be, by myself, except for 1 month out of the year during spring training. No, I need this energy, 5-6 months out of the year. Like there's something about it that keeps you going.
It's just as amazing. And I'm always amazed by the fans and how passionate they are. And to be honest with you, I mean, growing up, I never really grew up like we all played sports, but I don't ever remember going to any professional sporting events. I remember going to bullfights because I grew up in South America. So I do vividly remember going to bullfights growing up. And of course, around that, there's a whole spectacle, right? Around bullfights and the passion that goes into that. But I don't ever remember growing up going to major sporting events like my children. My children understand major sporting events, right? They're so spoiled right now because they've gone to every major sporting event, thanks to both my job and my husband's job. When I got my job with World Cup, I literally had just gotten out of school and I'd graduated from college and I'd followed this guy up to Washington, D.C. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had majored in French and Spanish literature. So I spoke a few different languages. Since I had grown up in South America, I spoke Spanish and Portuguese, and then I majored in French. So I had French. And I was literally trying to get a job with temp agencies. I would have taken any job they gave me. And I remember walking in and there was a job posting for somebody who spoke languages. And I went in and it was for a receptionist position. And they told me, they're like, well, we can't tell you, but it's what it is, but it's a major sporting event that's coming to the US in 1994. Now, having grown up in Brazil, that's one thing I knew. World Cup was huge, right? If Brazil was in the World Cup or if they won a game, it was declared a national holiday so that people could watch the match. So I knew exactly, I'm like, oh, this could be pretty interesting. World Cup is coming here in the US. And this was in 1991. So it was 3 years. They were just starting the organizing committee. And I got the job. I remember going to the interview and they paraded people through, making sure that I actually did speak the languages that I claimed that I spoke. And they gave me the job as a receptionist, answering the phones. And because they had this glorified idea because of FIFA, you know, when you walk into FIFA's offices, there are these very beautiful women that speak multiple languages. And I think that's kind of what they were thinking, like, we want somebody that speaks all these languages to receive our guests. And I got the job. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a receptionist, but I know I can do more. And I started the whole volunteer program. And I would literally have people, I would send out flyers for volunteers. We were looking for volunteers and people would call in and I would answer the phone, you know, good morning, World Cup 94. And they would ask for, can I speak with Leah Linke, please? And I'd be like, one moment, please. And I'd put them on hold and then pretend that I came to the phone so that they wouldn't know I was the receptionist. So, and then World Cup moved their headquarters out to LA. And I begged them to send me out to LA because by then I had broken up with the boy that I had moved to DC with. And I just wanted a new start. And I moved to LA and they put me in the protocol department. And because of my languages, and that's where I started planning events. And I was responsible for planning, you know, fresh out of college, for planning all of the events for all the heads of states that came in, managing the Tribune of Honor. And it just so happened that World Cup, Brazil won that World Cup. So I had my family there with me. The country that I had been raised in won the World Cup. And that's truly how I got hooked to events and sporting events.
Wow, what an incredible experience, especially for your home, like Brazil. Like you
couldn't have made it up. And then while I was at World Cup, I met my husband. So my husband was the press officer for the US national team. And we met, fell in love 6 months after we started dating. We were engaged, married a year later, and now it's 28 years. 28 years we've been married and 2 boys, and we've had a great life.
Oh, he's got the chills.
Yeah.
I love that. You said something interesting. You said you begged them to take you out to LA.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, essentially you were advocating for yourself to do more because you said you took a job as a receptionist.
Oh, I knew.
Even though you knew you could do more.
Once I got my foot in the door that I was going to be able to do more. And I did. I went and I remember, I think he was a COO. I mean, my immediate boss, one of my first mentors, Karen Bybee, she headed up the protocol department. And, you know, when we first started out, I was employee number 8 at the organizing committee. So we were all doing a little bit of everything. And I asked her if I could move to LA because I knew Alan Rothenberg had gotten involved and they moved their headquarters out to LA. And I knew that that's where the action was going to be, that the office in DC was going to become very small, really focused on government relations. And I wanted to move. I wanted to get out of DC and I wanted to move. And I went to them and I remember, I don't know what his position was, COO or president at the time. he said, well, what did she think? We hired her as a receptionist. Why didn't she tell us she wanted to do more? So, and, of course, in the back of my head, I always knew I was going to do more than just be a receptionist. And so I was very fortunate that they took a chance in me and they moved me out. They flew me out there. I think they paid for my van that had hardly anything in it to move out there. And the rest is really history.
So is it hard to leave? So once World Cup was over, is that why you made the jump to your next role, or was it more for opportunity?
No. So with the way our organizing committee works is once the event happens, the organizing committee disbands. So I was technically out of a job. I think I got a year's severance pay and I took full advantage. I was too young to realize how I really should have just gotten a job immediately and, put that severance pay away. So I took full opportunity of that severance because I was getting married. And then I went, while I was at World Cup, we had hired a company called Party Planners West to do some of our events. And so when Dean finally said, Leah, you got to get a job. You got to get off your butt and you got to get a job. I'm like, okay, I'll go find a job.
So you weren't worried at all. You kind of just enjoyed your wedding, enjoyed that time.
my wedding. And then let me tell you something, the O.J. Simpson chase happened and I became obsessed with that because it was just the town over. We lived in Westwood, happened in Brentwood, and I literally became obsessed with it, where I would sit in front of the TV watching that trial all day long. And Dean would come home from work. I'd still be in my pajamas. And he'd be like, Leah, seriously, you have to get a job. So finally, I'm like, okay, you're right. So then I went out and I reached out to Pat Ryan, who runs Party Planners West. And I interviewed and I got a job right away as one of her event coordinators. And that was in 1995. So in 1995, I started towards the end of 95. Actually, it was in the summer because I know we were just getting ready for an all-star game. I started with Party Planners West and I had been with Pat, another mentor, very strong female leader and mentor. I learned so much from her, but I started with her. And then a year later, my husband was offered a job in Colorado. And it must have been the fall because Super Bowl was always a huge client of ours, was always a huge event. And we always sort of focused on Super Bowl throughout the year. And I remember going in to Pat's office, telling her that Dean got offered a job in Colorado, I've got to leave. And I fully expected her to say, see ya, have a nice life. It was nice having you. And she didn't. She said to me, she's like, well, just because you're leaving doesn't mean you can't still work for me. So I was like, that's interesting. And then I thought about it, I'm newly married, no children, moving to a new city. And I went back to her and I said, I really appreciate the opportunity, but I think I want to be able to go into an office and meet people. I don't want to feel remote. So, she essentially back in 1995, was offering me the opportunity to work remote when people did not work remote. The idea of remote working was non-existent.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I really think I'm going to a new city. I really think I need to be able to go into an office to meet new people. She's like, well, they have these offices where you can office share and you can go into an office and you share a receptionist and you have you share equipment and you can have an office. So you can still go into the city and work. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that. So then I went back and I talked to Dean again about it. And we decided, she clearly wanted me to stay on. I was so honored. And we decided, okay, sure. Better to go and have a job and I'll try it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then I'll get a job locally. And so Dean and I moved to Denver and we lived in a town outside of Denver called Evergreen. And he and I would commute into work every day. And I found an office that was literally right next door to where he was working. And we would commute into town every day. And then I got pregnant. And everything was working great. And then I got pregnant and I called her up and I said, Pat, I'm pregnant. this whole idea of working from home and not going to the office is starting to sound more appealing to me. And she said, okay, great. Get rid of the office and work from home. I mean, I'm telling you, the flexibility that she gave me is unparalleled. I mean, she really invested in me and allowed me to kind of carve my own path within. Like, I was a little bit of a trailblazer within Party Planners West. I was the first one who had ever gotten pregnant at Party Planners West. She had never had a staff that had gotten pregnant. So she and I together developed the maternity leave policy because she didn't have one, because she never had to have one. And together we figured it out. And she was so supportive of me every step along the way. Baby number one, and I remember baby number two, I was at the All-Star game in Boston and found out I was pregnant with baby number two, when she came up with a really cute way to let my husband know that I was pregnant by putting it in like the ticket package, the MLB All-Star ticket package. And she was like, just right, we hit a home run. And I sent him the little pregnancy stick. And so she was a true mentor of mine. And she was almost like a mother to me, because I had lost my mother when I was in college, and she really became a mother figure to me. Pat did. And I mean, she is such a brilliant person. And I look out there right now at all the people that are running events right now. We all call it PPW University because she really did train so many people in the events world. And it's just, I'm always in awe of everything she was able to accomplish as a woman back in that day, and everything she passed on to me. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And I have to resist to tell my own experiences with Pat. But in the short time that we're chatting, I mean, it seems to me that you just kind of always like follow your gut and just kind of, you're not overly anxious with planning out exactly your career step by step. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I've never have been. And look, I've been very, very fortunate. I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time to get that. I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean, let me tell you something. When I was a child, my mother used to tell me, Leah, you could be a bilingual secretary. Like, that was what I was raised. I had two brothers. They were all like being poised to be like major executives. And my mother used to tell me like I should aspire to be a bilingual secretary. Nothing wrong with that, but that's what I was raised to do. And the thing is when we were children, we moved around just about every 3 years. So I think that had a lot to do with kind of how I am. Like, I just roll with the punches. You learn to be resilient. You roll with the punches and you just go with it. I mean, I never really stressed. I got that job in DC. I followed a guy to DC. I got the job in DC. It made me realize my passion for events and these major sporting events. And then Dean got the job offer. Like, there was always question and wonder, but I was very fortunate. I mean, I was so fortunate that Pat supported me the way she did. And then, I was at PPW for 15 years. I did 15 Super Bowls and, 2 children. I'll be honest, I was never really good with the baby. I had never been around babies. I was like, oh, baby, I don't know.
You sound like me.
I swear, that's how I was. Dean was the one that was amazing with the babies. But then I got better as they started to get older.
Sure.
Then once they got to high school, I realized, and it's different for everybody. And I recognize that. Like, some people want to stay home with their babies. Some people feel like when they go to preschool, it's important. For me, I felt like if they were going to sway or be influenced in a negative way, it was those high school years, to me, were critical years. So that's when I left PPW. Like, I was traveling a lot. Dean was traveling a lot with his job. And it was those high school years for me, not to say that it's that for everybody. For me, those were the times that I felt like I needed to be home to make sure that my kids really stayed on the straight and narrow and that they didn't get in trouble. And so that's what I did. I took a few years off and stayed home with my kids. Fortunately, I was able to do that because Dean had established his career and was doing really well. And I got my kids through high school. I got them into college. And then Sean Conley had worked at Party Planners West, and he left and started his own company called Create. And he was doing an event for NHL in Raleigh. So I live in Chapel Hill. He was doing an event locally. And he just happened to call me out to see if I wanted to help. And I'm like, sure, it's in my backyard, I'll help. And then I got the bug again. Like I had forgotten, I got very comfortable and you forget. So I helped him with the NHL All-Star game. And then I got the bug again. And I was like, and then I started getting like jittery again, like wanting to get out there, but I still stayed home, still made sure the kids didn't get in trouble in high school. And then he called me with an opportunity that I just couldn't turn down. It was a Sony press junket internationally. He was going to Madrid, which is where I was born. He was going to Paris, which is where I had studied. He was going to London. He was going to Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is where I was raised. And he was going to Mexico City, like this press junket. And he needed somebody to help manage it. And I'm like, you're killing me. And I did it. It was amazing. And he then, a couple of years later, his VP of operations left to have children. She's a very important part of my story, Vivi Gregnano, who's now my VP of ops and who also had worked at Party Planners West. She had taken a job with Sean as his VP of ops, and she left to have children. And Sean called and asked if I would step in. Like the kids were just about in college, and he called and asked if I would step in to take over as his VP of ops since Vivi was leaving. And I did. And that must have been in 2012, 2013. And so I started back with Sean at Create as his VP of ops.
You left PPW and you said, okay, it's time to spend time with my children. And you made that decision. And was it a difficult decision? Were you afraid that you wouldn't be able to get back into the industry, or were you not concerned about that?
I didn't think about it. That for me was not a consideration. Like I'm not one of those people. And I attribute it to the way my parents raised us, that you've got to just think in the moment and make a decision for the moment. I mean, can you imagine my parents or my mother raising 4 children internationally and moving them internationally every 3 years? And I don't ever remember growing up it being like stressful. Like it was just sort of, oh, by the way, we're moving to Peru, or oh, by the way, we're moving back to Brazil. Oh, by the way, we're moving to New York. Like it just kind of happened. I really attribute my attitude to the way I was raised. It wasn't part of my thought process. My immediate thought process was, I have to be home for my children. Dean is traveling way too much. He's a play-by-play broadcaster, and he was getting way too many jobs. So he was all over. This was back in the day when every single play-by-play guy went to where the games actually played, as opposed to calling games from the studio. He was traveling way too much. And we had always made a commitment to one of us being home with the kids at all times. So I just decided, okay, it's time for me to be home. I have to be home. I have to be there for my kids. Like that was my priority. That's all I thought about.
It's interesting. I love that approach. Because I feel like a lot of my clients, this happens to a lot of my coaching clients, they freeze, right? When they want to make a decision, they're thinking so far in the future that they can't make that decision. And I'm guilty of that too. They can't make a decision on the right now because they're thinking about, well, what if 5 years from now I can't get back in? What if I want to have children and they're not supportive? You're a perfect example of, you know what? My leadership, Pat, didn't have a maternity leave policy and we wrote it together. Right. So if I had worried about that, right, like, oh, she doesn't even have a policy, she's not going to take care of me. Like you would have just talked yourself. If you made up a story, you would have talked yourself out of it. When in fact, you helped her write it, which is incredible.
It's incredible. And honestly, she really does deserve so much of the credit because she was open to it and she was receptive to it. And to be honest, I'm trying to think back to when I had my first son in Colorado. And I'm trying to think back whether I thought that, oh no, am I still going to be able to work after I have a child? I don't think it really crossed my mind. Like I just knew, look, I wasn't a baby person. So I knew I wasn't going to be one of these people that wasn't going to be able to. And everyone kept telling me, oh, just wait till the baby's born. You're going to fall in love. And yeah, of course I fell in love with my baby, but I loved my job too. I want it to be out there. And, there's no right or wrong. There's no standard that is right for everybody. every single person, every single woman is different, and every single person and every single woman's journey is different. It has to be different because the way you were raised, what your background is, contributes to every decision that you make and how you make that decision. I truly, truly do believe that. And I feel that my ability to just, like I said, roll with the punches has so much to do with the way I was raised. And it's interesting because now in my position with On Location, I'm put in a position where I'm managing, upwards of 60 people. And it's the favorite part of my job. Whereas before, the favorite part of my job, I used to love bringing in the emerging businesses and the minority businesses and helping them be a piece of a major sporting event that they never would have. And the NFL does such a good job of it. And Major League Baseball does such a good job of it, of really going out there into the local markets and pulling in these emerging businesses. And when I was doing this, when I first started out, that was always my favorite part of my job, was pulling in these emerging businesses and allowing them to be part of this major spectacle that they never would have been able to if we just went and hired the big caterers or whatever. And I loved that part of it more than anything. And now I'm noticing in my job, I still love putting together the events and planning them and conceptualizing them and coming up with amazing experiences for our guests. What I love most about my job is mentoring all these young kids, and especially the women, and helping them because they're all going through so many different phases. I've got women that work for me that have young kids. I've got women that work for me who want to have kids. I've got women that work for me who've already had kids or are in the same position that I am. And just to be able to mentor them throughout and show them that there's no one way that's going to work for everybody. And you're never going to be able to put your life in a pretty little box and tie it with a little bow, because you never know what's going to come up. And so you have to allow yourself, and I teach my kids the same thing, you have to open yourself up to allow opportunities to come into you and just allow life to happen. You're never going to be able to, that's what I tell people all the time, you're never going to be able to truly plan your life. So exactly what you were saying, Jahaan, you can't stress out about what you think your life is going to be 5 years from now. You have to look at what your life is today, and you have to make decisions that are right for you today. And that's the biggest thing to me that I think contributed to where I am today, and that I try to teach these kids that I'm working with right now.
So inspirational. I feel like, your next job can be a motivational speaker. Some of the toughest conversations we have are the ones that we have with ourselves. We can convince ourselves to believe stories that we don't even know are true. What's crazy is we allow that story to take a toll on our confidence. Have you been there before? I know that I have. We get in our heads. We beat ourselves up. Here's some tough love. Nobody's got time for that. We are high achieving women who have big career goals. We don't have time to get in our own way. And I am here to support you with my new one-on-one coaching program, Step Into Your Power and Own Your Career. My clients have told me that when we work together, I've helped them get out of their own way, regain their confidence, learn how to manage their emotion and mindset. They've told me that they've been able to get their voice back and use it with confidence. The most important thing, they've told me that we've identified the obstacle that was getting in their way. If you want to learn more about this program, scroll down in the show notes, click on the link that says Step Into Your Power and Own Your Career. You can set up time to chat with me, and we can figure out if this is the right program for what you need. All right, let's get back to the episode. Tell me this, when you're mentoring the next generation of women in sports, one narrative that a lot of women will get caught up in is working in a male-dominated industry. So I've been in the industry for 20 years. You've been in the industry over 20 years, longer than I have. So talk about your experiences and what sort of advice you give women.
So look, I would be lying if I said I had gotten frustrated, especially now, because you have to understand, when I worked at PPW, right, I worked for a woman. Sean's company was very much a family business. And then all of a sudden we went from on location purchasing Create, which they did in 2016, and then in 2020 being purchased by Endeavor. So now all of a sudden I'm part of this massive corporation, and there's no doubt it's male dominated. And I would be lying if there haven't been times where I have felt frustrated that I'm not heard. But I feel like there really has been a shift, that the guys that are out there, that especially the ones that I work with, are really trying hard to recognize, and they see it because it's a little bit of a generational thing, right? Because I definitely see some of the old school men, like my father, I'm sure, who probably only worked with men. Like there's still some of those guys around that or that are training their daughters to be bilingual secretaries, right?
Yeah.
But this generation of men that I'm working with right now, I think they are seeing, like, they all have daughters, right? And they're seeing it, and they're recognizing that we are as capable as they are. But yeah, of course, every once in a while, do I feel like I'm not being heard because I'm a woman? To me, I think that's a cop-out, honestly. I think it's a cop-out to say I'm not being heard because I'm a woman, because I don't think it exists. I really, and this is me. I'm an optimist. I'm a glass half full kind of person. And when the women come in to me and they complain, they feel like they're not being heard because they're women, I just talk them off the ledge and I just say, listen, that's not an excuse. Like, if you feel like you're not being heard because you're a woman, you can't use that excuse. Like, you have to say something, and you have to say something that's valuable, that's worth listening to. And we have kids, and to me, we have kids that have started, guys and girls that are, or men and women. I always call them kids because they're all younger than my children, but they are starting, and it's just as important to me to mentor the guys as it is to mentor the women, because it's a completely different environment that they're going into. And they have a lot to learn as to how to work with women too, and how to work with strong women, because there's a lot of strong women out there. So I'm mentoring them. I'm not just mentoring the women in this male-dominated sport. I'm also mentoring these young men that are coming into this male-dominated sport, teaching them that, hey, just because you're a guy, you don't get any advantages over the women. Like, I look at them all equally.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I like your thought process about, you can't use I'm being treated differently because I'm a woman as an excuse. Like whether it's true or not, let's figure out how to use your voice, be louder, stronger, whatever you need to be in that moment. What can you learn from that moment? Because I always tell people, I was like, listen, you're going to run into that, without using names here, that same person in a different industry, in a different company. Like, it's almost good practice. Whatever obstacle you're hitting now, you're going to hit it anywhere.
You're
right?
always going to hit it.
And you might hit it with a woman who's your manager. So let's just use it as practice. Let's not let it deflate you, right? Let's not let it defeat you.
That's the biggest thing.
We need you, right? Like, we need you to keep going and use your voice.
That's the biggest thing. I mean, that's the biggest thing I teach my managers too. Like, you have to manage everybody differently. Everybody has to be managed differently. You can't use the same management style on two people. Like, every single individual needs a different management style. When I constantly hear about, some of my managers, they are having issues managing their younger employees that report up to them. And I'm constantly telling them, I always use the box. Like, you can't put everybody in the same box. You have to find what especially this generation of kids, you have to find what motivates them. And you have to find that piece in them, male or female, that is going to get the most out of them for you. And it's never going to be the same thing for each person.
It makes our job harder as a leader.
It's hard. Yeah, as a leader, it really does. And generations are different, and managing up and managing down is different. But if I am training these kids to eventually take over this behemoth that is on location, who are just trying to go after every major sporting event that's out there, I have to train strong people, and I have to train people and give them a reason to want to stay here too, right? Yeah. So many people people nowadays are jumping all over the place, and I'm trying to create a foundation for a company that's basically our new company that we're building from the ground up. And I'm really focusing on my foundation because I'm not going to be here forever. That I know.
That's the one thing you can say.
That is definitely one thing I can say, but I want to be able to look back at On Location because I have no doubt that On Location is going to become a household name in experiences for people going, whether it be concerts or major sporting events or what have you. I mean, we just won the Olympics. We're the official hospitality provider for the Olympics for Paris 24, Milan 26, and LA 28. And that's huge.
Yeah, congratulations.
It's a huge, huge job we have ahead of us. And I have no doubt that we are creating a brand that will become a household name. And I want to be able to, when I'm gone, I want to be able to look back and say, hey, I had a part in that. I built the foundation of the department that actually builds the experiences and builds the events.
Last question before we go to the rapid fire questions. So you went to Create after PPW, you went to Create. Create was purchased by On Location, correct? And then On Location was purchased by Endeavor. Correct. So this whole time, so now you are a senior vice president. With all these purchases, and like sometimes you hear horror stories, like new ownership, new leadership comes in, and it's difficult for existing executives. What was your experience like holding such a big title and such a big role?
At Create, Sean Connolly was the founder of Create, and I was always his SVP of Ops. Like I was always his second in command. And once Endeavor purchased us or purchased Sean's company, Sean decided that he was good. He was ready to move on. I don't think he would have been a great fit for the corporate environment. Like he was used to having his own company and making his own decisions. And he moved on, and I just saw him this weekend, and, he's living his best life right now. And he is another one who, if you were to ask me the three most influential people in my life, I would have to say it was Karen Bybee from 94, Pat Ryan from BBW, and Sean Connolly from Create. Without those three people, I would not be where I am today. So once Sean left, it's really interesting. And again, I even forget that I made this call. But at one point, On Location was going to move the production department, my department, over to another company within Endeavor that does brand activations. And I remember calling, it must have been Paul Kane or John LaValle, are you either our CEO or CFO? And I was like, you guys are making a mistake. Like nobody does events the way we do events. We are just a well-oiled machine. We get in there, much like PPW is, right? We get in there, we get the job done, we build the events, and then we get out at nominal cost compared to if you were to go to an agency. I don't even know how I honestly don't even remember making the call. They remind me that I was the reason we remained within On Location. And then Sean left and they made me in charge of the department. Little did I know, at that point, we were still just doing Super Bowl and we were doing some NCAA stuff. So it was still what I had been doing for 15 years or 25 years. Like at PPW, the 15 Super Bowls that I did. And so it was no different, but then we started growing. And then they started going after more and more and more. And, and then I'll never forget when we got the Olympics. I mean, we were definitely the dark horse in that. And yeah, there are times during the day when I have to take a deep breath when I realize how much responsibility is on my plate, because our department is technically responsible for delivering the product that these guys sell, right? We've got amazing ticketing guys. We've got amazing product architecture guys that actually come up with what the product is that we're going to sell. And then it's up to us to actually build it. So yeah, there are times when I do have to take a deep breath because I realize the enormity of my job. But then I just feel like I've got so much support. Like our senior leadership has given me so much support. They definitely recognize that we add value to the table. We bring value to the table, and our experiences that we build have been really great. Knock on wood, we haven't had any major issues yet. And I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have the support of our senior leadership. Once Sean left, they definitely wrapped their arms around me and they said, whatever you need, Leah. They've supported me building my team. I'm here and it's just coincidental that I happen to live in Chapel Hill, and two of the primary founders of Prime Sport, which was another company, the ticketing arm that was bought, happens to be in Raleigh. So now I'm working in an office with them, love them, and we're building a massive team here in Raleigh, and we've got senior leadership support to do it. And I think it's just, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I've been so lucky that I've gotten all the support that I've needed to be able to get where I am. I also work really, really hard. And there's no doubt I wouldn't be where I am if I was just sitting back and just whatever, signing budgets or signing papers. Like, I clearly have worked really, really hard. And it was really interesting. It was a moment last week where I overheard my son telling a friend of his that I was the hardest working woman he knew. I definitely got emotional because I love my job so much that, yes, it's been hard work, but when it's all said and done, everything I'm doing is for my children. And to hear that from my son was just, I literally started crying when I heard it. So yeah. I don't know whether I answered your question, but I think support is the biggest thing, having the support from the senior leadership at On Location.
Yeah, I was going to say you did answer my question, and we got a little story about your son, which I think everyone is right now is just holding their heart right now. You answered it because you said something kind of like read between the lines here, but you spoke up, you spoke truth to power when they were going to make a move that you didn't necessarily agree with. And that's not easy to do. Yeah. And you did it.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about it, and I think this kind of goes with how I just roll with the punches, like it must have been a stressful call for me to make. Mm-hmm. I'm so good at like doing something and then moving on to the next. It kind of goes into that whole thing we were talking about, not worrying about what's going to happen 3 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And then when you get something, when you accomplish something, then okay, great. Like, don't bathe in all of the celebration of what you've accomplished. Like, okay, now it's time to go on to the next thing. Yeah. So like, I hardly even remember making that call, but I can imagine when I made it, I must have felt stressed making it. I must have rehearsed it several times because it was a big call to make. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Oh, I love that you shared that. Thank you. All right. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions? These are easy.
As long as you can edit them, I'm ready.
All right. 12 easy questions. I swear it goes by fast. Okay. First thing that comes to your mind. What's your favorite sports moment?
When Brazil won the World Cup in 1994.
What is something people always get wrong about you?
That I am an extrovert.
What is one food you wouldn't want to give up?
Cheese.
Are you a morning or a night person?
Definitely a night person.
Favorite holiday?
Easter.
Oh, that's the first one. Dog or cat person?
Neither really, but if I had to choose, I'd choose dogs for sure.
What product would you stockpile if you found out they weren't going to sell it anymore?
I'm trying to think. I really don't know. Maybe today, like it changes daily. Today, probably bandoliers.
I was going to say, this is probably like a hard question for you because you're like, I don't know. It changes and it keeps evolving.
It changes daily, but today my obsession is bandoliers. Someone introduced me to bandoliers and I have spent way too much money on them.
Wait, what are bandoliers?
Okay, props to bandoliers. They are those phone cases, for your phones that carry, and they have a strap on them, but they have all different styles and they have wallets in them. And for us event people, when we need our free hands, and they have some really, really cool ones. So
all right, we will be linking. I will link to those in the show notes for everybody. Okay, what's your favorite app?
Oh my God, I'm so not an app person. I would say it's probably my maps because I would be lost without them.
Well, this next question may not work for you, but we'll go with it. Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram?
It would have to be Twitter because that's the only, I don't have either one of those accounts, but I guess it would have to be Twitter because that's the most archaic one.
It's good. I downloaded TikTok, I caved, and then I deleted it because I never used it. It just doesn't work for me. Who's your biggest inspiration in life?
Oh God, that's a hard one. You know what? Honestly, this is going to be so sappy, but I'd have to say my husband.
Aww.
Because he truly is. Like, my son thinks I'm the hardest working woman. My husband is truly the hardest working man I know. And he just inspires me. He knew what he wanted to do and he went out and he got it. And now I'm getting teary-eyed, but I would have to say right now he's my biggest inspiration.
I love it. That's beautiful. Okay, last two. As a child, what did you wish to become when you grew up?
I don't know, because I had my mother telling me to aspire to be a bilingual secretary. I mean, I think I aspired to be in international business.
Mm-hmm.
I think I always thought, like when I was studying, I would say, that's a really hard question for me, Jahaan.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's all right. You can pass.
Okay. That's a tough one. It wasn't like I ever aspired to be president or the Queen of England or anything like that.
Queen of England. All right, last one. Finish the sentence. The future of women working in sports is?
It's endless.
Yes. Love it. Leah, this conversation has been incredible. So inspirational. Thank you for spending time with us. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
Email is probably best. LLinke@onlocationexp.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Leah Linke.
Fantastic. Thank you, Leah.
Hey, we have lots of positions open. I highly recommend anybody who's interested in getting in our business to check out our website, onlocationexp.com. We are planning amazing events, and our department in particular is about to drop about 4 or 5 different positions. So highly recommend people check it out. Lots of positions open, and it's a great opportunity. And Jahaan, thank you so much for having me.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram @Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.